Hey, the game starts tonight. Let's get this thing on the road.
What game? Okay. Please, people. Hello? Okay, I will call the Southbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting agenda September 5th, 2019 to order at 7:02. Can we have the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. Okay, presentations. We asked for the Director of Senior Services, Tamitha Rossi, to come tonight and give a little presentation on some of what she's running into with problems. Tamitha?
Good morning, everyone.
Hi. Morning?
Hi. I'm sorry. Oh, my God. It's been a long day. Apologize. So I understand that there were some questions and clarifications requested regarding my director's report, which actually covered 3 months. So I didn't know if anyone had any specific questions of some of the things that I shared. Transportation clearly is our biggest issue at this point. And what I can do is I don't have like a formal presentation, but certainly I had some things that I could share with you and discuss. I can share. Medical transportation has become a huge issue for us. This is a presentation that I gave to the Southbury Senior Alliance yesterday. It's a hopeful possibility for us. And just to backtrack, when I started in August of 2016, it quickly became apparent we had a lot of people serving seniors, not really working together, communicating together. Created a great partnership with my colleague, Jade Stoltz, the executive director of the Jewish Federation, as well as with Heritage Village. And with the transition that's going on at Heritage Village, I'm very hopeful that that good relationship will continue and working towards solutions for our seniors. This is not a fancy PowerPoint. It's really the meat and potatoes of just our medical rides. The increase in medical rides from last year to this year, if the numbers continue to prove out the way they have over the last 8 months, is just over a 19% increase in 12 months in medical transportation. I think I covered, pretty clearly in my director's report some of the issues that we've had to deal with. It became readily apparent last year we were not competitive. Southbury was not competitive. The average going rate out there for drivers is somewhere between $16 and $18 per hour. We're paying $13. So after considerable discussion, I had drivers actually coming to me in the first Selectmen. I finally got approval to raise that to $16.50 an hour. Will at least allow us to be competitive. As a case in point and example, I actually had one of my drivers not able to report to work for us because she was going over and working for Woodbury at $16 an hour. So there are controllables we can control, and then the rest we just have to leave up to hoping that things will pan out for us. Finding F-endorsed drivers is very challenging in this discussion of raising hourly rates and casting a bigger net, because that was another problem. I think we need to cast a bigger net in trying to draw drivers, and no offense to any reporters present, but voices, we need to cast a wider net than just voices, and that was one of the discussions that have been ongoing, that I've been advocating for. As an example, in my research, repeated research, and reaching out to even first student, they laughed me off the phone not once but twice, because the problem is they're in them seeking drivers, they're paying a $4,000 signing bonus. And then what's happening is these drivers go on unemployment for the summertime, and they are making more that way than if they came to work for us. If we were to get lucky and one of them were to come and work for us over the summer as a seasonal, and I've had those, when I started I had 2 of those drivers, and I just lost another one who's now gotten a steady job at the school system, non-driver job. The problem is that once they've put time in with the town, and then the next summer maybe they decide, well, I don't want to do that and I'm going to file for unemployment. Now the town of Southbury, the bigger, another issue is now we're going to be also on the hook for part of that unemployment cost. So that's something that I've been dealing with. The other thing is bringing on new drivers when and if we're lucky to have one, and I have made a recommendation this evening, and I'm very happy to recommend her. The problem is she will not be available with a full unencumbered schedule until January 1. We'll only have her for limited time now, but I wanted to get her on board as quickly as possible. A full pool of drivers on last year's ridership is 8 drivers, is comfortable. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do any trips. Kathy cannot schedule anything as far as trips because we just don't have the drivers. And then add to it a whole slew of bus issues. We've had a multitude of bus issues recently that have really harmed us. You see the cancellation numbers. These are people that are really relying on us. Hopefully the Southbury Senior Alliance, we're working together to try to come up with some form of a partnership. But I want to be very guarded in, we're moving in positive directions, but it's still a fledgling organization. We're just celebrating our first year, and we've decided that this is a very paramount project. I laid out these numbers. Attorney Jim Flaherty is on our board of officers, and he had requested that I put together this snapshot that I handed to you that lays out basically what our expenses are to run just the medical portion of our transportation. So, and the other thing that I want to point out, because I think it's important that you understand the legitimacy of the numbers, you will notice that in this year's numbers, I'm including canceled. We didn't provide rides to those canceled rides, but they account for volume. It's on page 1, halfway down the page, you'll see in parentheses I have canceled rides because I want to properly portray what our volume is. So we've controlled some of the controllables, we've raised the hourly rate. I received permission to advertise on Indeed. We're going to do that. I don't know if it will be fruitful, but at least there are efforts within our control that we can try to remedy this situation or make it a little bit easier. We've been hit with some illnesses by our drivers, long-term illnesses that have taken them out of work. So it all happened at once in May, and the summer's just been gruesome, quite honestly. So,
Timothy, how many of the drivers were out on medical?
3.
3?
3. Okay. A full host, like a comfortable, like I said, going by last year's numbers. With 8, we were pretty comfortable. But you have to figure, they're part-time per diem on call. So in this economic climate, to bring somebody in and interview them and say, yeah, we're going to train you for 10 days, then you may not hear from us, and then you're going to hear from us, and we're going to want you 4 days in a row, and you may not. I mean, it's tough. Now, I will tell you that there were efforts to address that, and let's guarantee hours. It's too much of a moving target. I wish I could come and say, at some point this will become black and white, but people get sick, people, cancel doctor's appointments, I mean, there's too many variables in the mix when you're dealing with this type of a service. And I will tell you that we ended up with a part-time per diem on-call driver with enough time off to take an entire month off. So I've actually asked the fiscal office for some clarity because that doesn't make any sense to me. I have full-timers that don't have anywhere near that amount of time off. So I just feel like we're kind of getting hit in all directions. And, you know, they're tough phone calls. They're tough phone calls with, you know, families that are desperate, seniors that are desperate. So we're doing our best to keep all the balls in the air. I'm pretty sure we've addressed everything. For your information, I've also rolled out a new manual. So when I came on board, my first directive given to me by the first selectman was get the transportation in order. And that's taken 2.5 years. And clearly, you know, it's still, you know, with these types of things, there's always a lot of fires to put out. And that doesn't count the people that go down in exercise class, you know, fainting. We had that happen this week. So, you know, there's always those variables playing a part in our day. But, so I started to put together a manual, and I met with HD Seeger in my first 2 weeks, your insurance company, our insurance company, and sat down with the gentleman representing HD Seeger and started to put together a manual. There were some real global issues within that manual that aren't for me to decide, so I had passed them on to the first selectman. I have since implemented a manual without that information because I need to get that rolled out. Over the course of 2 years, as I found deficiencies, I would create a memo that would go to our drivers. Example, what's our cell phone policy? That was released in my first 3 weeks on the job. We had safe shoes. I had drivers that were showing up with flip-flops. I can't have them driving with flip-flops. So as these memos were created, thus came the start of the manual with the template that HD Seeger was recommending, and they're just recommendations. I was in touch with their rep. I'll actually be meeting with him and our fiscal director regarding some of the forms that we're using for incident reporting on the 25th of September. We just put that together late this afternoon. But you know, I can't expect our drivers to remember a memo from 18 months ago. I can't bring on new drivers and not have succinct policy in place so that they understand what our rules and policies are. So that manual was rolled out on August 1st. I have a copy of that. I also have a copy of the draft that I don't know whether that will ever, you know, be finalized, but it has some global issues that really affect the whole town and employees. It wasn't my place to make that decision. So the manual that I rolled out doesn't have any of that in it. So I will leave that with all of you as well. My understanding is those things need to be ratified. So I don't know. Please know that I'm open for whatever you need me to do, but I needed to be able, in this mode, this crisis mode, I needed to put as many things in place to help support what we're trying to achieve, and that is basically, really, honestly, is to stabilize the transportation.
When you say that it needs to be ratified, is it by us? Or
my
by
understanding
who?
was the Board of Selectmen ratified those things.
I'm just asking because we haven't seen that. So what's the status of that?
We're working on, she worked on the driver manual. It's rolled out to the to the drivers. It's pretty basic, working with the insurance company. We don't have to really, I don't think we have to ratify that on the board.
Okay.
There's just the global.
I was just following up on the comment.
Yeah, the stuff, there was things in there that I don't have in front of me, but were a little bit more to do with personnel issues than the driver's manual itself.
The other issue too that has not, I believe it's pieces of it are being addressed, but the fleet management portion of that has not. We're managing our fleet, which is kind of, it's none of the other departments are. So we are. That's another thing that we're working on, and that's another piece in this because there is a fleet managerial piece in here that was written by Tom Crow. Thank you. So the first, if you look, you need to pay attention to the date on the lower left corner. So what I just handed you is what I implemented effective August 1st with our drivers, and all our new drivers will be receiving that hopefully will come flocking to our doors. And this is actually the draft that Jeff has, that the first selectman has with, but that's got the global issues, like I said, that I think need to be, they're kind of HR related and legally related, so. So hopefully that covers some of the things that, in a little bit more detail, that were within my report. I don't know if anybody had any questions or clarifications.
So my understanding is that I saw the minutes from Senior Alliance the other night, and they're working, Waterbury Hospital might have some transportation available for their clients?
Yeah, see, unfortunately, as we all know, our primary care doctors and doctors are really, it's kind of a little bit like a Pac-Man, and they're getting kind of scoffed up by the local hospitals. So there is a piece from Waterbury Hospital. If they are Waterbury Hospital or Alliance Medical, the Alliance Medical Group, I think I have the name right, but it's Waterbury Hospital or them. There is a Be Well bus. That's what it's called. Jeremy Rodrigo, who represents Waterbury Hospital and is on the Alliance board, is going to be getting me that information, and I'm going to be including that in my directory. The newsletter is the best way to get stuff out. They read the newsletter, they look at the newsletter. So I'll be including that in our next newsletter. We might even do a flyer. I've just got to figure out how much information he's giving me in the narrative, and then however we can fit it into the newsletter, we're going to get that. And then our transportation coordinator will also be able to start pushing that information out to seniors too, when and if we might get into a problem. From my vantage point, I can't offer numbers because Schedules Plus will not allow me to extract Danbury specific service. But Danbury is a very, very big problem for us right now. It used to be Waterbury, and look at where we are now, like 18 months later, it's Danbury. We have a lot more people and more volume going to Danbury, and as anybody who gets on 84 at any point in time in the day, it's a little bit of, a guessing game as to whether or not you're going to have a smooth drive or not. And we're getting a lot of traffic issues, especially given the time that we're transporting the seniors. And the other thing is we do the best we can to pool them together. And people have said, oh, well, they can go to a doctor here. Many of these people are going for chemo treatments and specialty treatments. And I really have an issue with having a senior that has like an 8 o'clock chemo appointment that gets out at noon, telling them, you're just gonna have to sit tight till 3 when we can get to you. I can't do that in right conscience. So we do our best to pool them together to get them there, but there is some back and forth going on. We've tried to minimize it the best we can. And that also plays in, again, to our fleet and the fleet management aspect of it. We currently have 4 buses. A full fleet is 5. So, we've got to start looking too at the replacement. And I was speaking with the fiscal director Dan today about what our plan is for fleet replacement, because they're getting a lot of wear and tear. So we're keeping an eye on that.
So our head mechanic was out for a while too. Has been part of the issue, and he's back, and we're going to have him evaluated. There was some mechanic. It kind of stormed all together.
It really, yeah, and we're still not out of the thick of it yet, I don't believe. One of my concerns, and as I was sharing with Dan, to procure a bus takes about a year or better. Our last bus that we went through the 5310 grant program with took upwards of 18 months to procure. So we already have, we've had some real big problems with 2 of our buses. I'm not a mechanic though, it's not up to me to say, this has so much more life. So we're looking forward to our head mechanic taking a look and doing an assessment. And then I'm hoping we can be a little progressive rather than reactive, and try to be a little bit ahead of that curve, because I think that's another thing that could really hit us hard.
So we have currently, how many buses?
We have 4, two of which are having major issues. One has a backup camera that's not currently working. Another one has lift issues. It went up to Granby. We lost it for the entire day to have it go up to Granby to our lift specialist, and they're claiming that there's wire issues, and I'm holding my breath that lift will hold. It's holding fast now with our head mechanic back. We're having him take a look, because if it goes back up to the lift specialist, it's going to take 2 drivers, I currently have 3, all day to go up there and come back, because they're going to need that bus for 2 days, which then means I'm going to lose 2 drivers again to go back up there to pick the bus up and come back. And we just, it's like we can't get out of our own way. It's one thing after another with the transportation piece, so.
How many drivers do we currently have?
We have one full-time and 2 reliable part-times. Another one, I say reliable in that they can give us the day. The other one is only available for a couple of hours.
So we have 3 drivers right now?
I would,
And 8 is
yeah.
ideal. So as
Yeah.
I read your report from last month, it seemed that you had some concerns about hiring and whatnot. I'm just wondering if anything's changed since then, or if there's any assistance your department
Well,
needs
we
to
were
make that
just,
happen.
yes, we just had made progress at the time that I wrote the report in becoming competitive, right, with the hourly rate, and the permission to be able to advertise on Indeed. At that point, I did have the driver that I'm recommending to you this evening was on my desk and ready to go. It was just a matter of timing. It's hard when I've got to wait for you guys to approve, but I get it. You know, we've got to go through that procedure. So we'll be getting her on board. Along with this manual that I rolled out, there is hours and hours and hours of work that has gone on within the transportation department and within my office to actually create a comprehensive driver training plan, which I'm very proud of, and I'm very happy to get that over to you as well. So there's real structure in how the drivers are getting trained. Heritage Village can be very, very confusing, especially if it's somebody coming from out of town, or even if they are from Southbury and aren't familiar with Heritage Village, the addresses don't make sense. There are quirky little things in where a bus can fit or not fit, or, you know, our drivers are very adept at that. So, so yes, in answer to your question, yes, we've started to control some of the controllables, but unfortunately, because it took so long, we're kind of behind the 8 ball, and we're still catching up. I did receive an application 2 days ago, but she doesn't have the credentials. So that's part of the problem. People just aren't reading. We had another one who was a former employee here, and as soon as he found out it was part-time per diem, he's like, oh, well, that's not what I applied for. And I said, well, it's, you know, it's right in the posting. So, you know, I'm hoping that we start to see more.
So like, as I read it, so the 2 things you were looking for was, at least in the report, the Indeed and the hourly rate.
And the hourly rate and the manual. And I made an
So-
executive decision, just rolled this out minus the things that need bigger decisions made on them because of, you know, because they deal globally and, you know, insurance-wise and HR-wise. They're not decisions that I can make as a department head.
So those things have been recently implemented, so I guess we'll have to.
Well, you'll see the difference. If you look at the 2 manuals, you'll see the manual in the draft manual of January that I didn't get word back on. So I just, like I said, I went ahead and rolled mine out. So that will now enable me. I mean, I think it's important, you know, it's important to be able to bring new people on and them know what their expectations are and how the department runs. But it, you know, it was becoming problematic even for my drivers who've been here all along. I mean, the memo about flip-flops, the same driver showed up in flip-flops again, you know, so because, you know, it's human nature. You're not going to remember a memo of, you know, 10, 12 months ago. So this way, everything's all in one place. They've signed off, they've accepted receipt and responsibility for what's contained therein, and they know that if they have any questions or problems, they can come to us. It's just a little bit more helpful too, managing this group of workers and drivers, so, yes.
This may be a question for another forum, but is it possible or conceivable or even a remote option to consider farming this out to a contract service so that we don't have to manage it? I mean, I'm hearing all these problems, and that's the kind of thing you say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
It is. It's been a lot of.
We do it with ambulances. We do it with school buses.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a service that could be called upon to?
I'm currently investigating that. I am currently investigating that. I think it would, you know, it would just shift the burden on.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
It sounds like it's just managing this thing is more than
it's
you
a
have
monster.
the staff to
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah, definitely.
Between hiring the drivers and fixing the buses, and dealing with, I mean, it looks like over 10% of the calls are not being handled just looking at the numbers, I don't know if that.
Well,
reading
that's
that
just
right.
medical. That doesn't count, that
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
count the
That's just
shopping
medical.
as well. So we do provide grocery shopping. The first thing that I will cut are the Monday trips that Robin does, that our lead driver does, that are like to a mall or to Jimmy's. To me, it's doctors first, nutrition second, and everything else comes after that. So, you know, we've had to prioritize that way. I've tried to be as proactive and ahead of it with families and seniors so that they know. But ultimately, you know, we're falling short from what has come to be expected of the department. The other thing with staffing too is our part-time counter person. We lost that person in April. I just got, you know, that got all squared away too. I just got our resumes whittled down, and that I'll be interviewing with our HR rep. I believe it's not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. So, because we are about to get hit really hard. Once we start to get into the end of September, beginning of October, it's membership re-enrollment, and it's bedlam. It's bedlam. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of incoming checks, and it's a lot of increased volume at the counter. And then we go from that right into the holidays. Last year, I think it was 140 holiday cheer baskets that we put together and distributed through our transportation department, as well as you know, our festival. You know, we do a holiday meal for the seniors too at the center. So that's always a sellout.
So George, I think the contract side of it can be difficult too with the medical cancellations, trying to fit everybody in. And like you said, going to Danbury is, how many trips can you make a day?
Right.
Crazy,
So
you never know what the traffic's going to be. I
You
went there
don't-
today, and it took,
Yeah.
took forever to get into.
So that original package that I gave you, that the Alliance was mulling over, there were some great ideas, there's some brilliant ideas that came out of me presenting what it looks like for the town currently. And quite frankly, if the Alliance can find some kind of a quasi-collaboration to put a standalone transportation piece in place for Southbury seniors just for medicals, it will take a huge burden off of us. But like I said, I just want to be cautious. That's not something that's going to happen, you know, within 6 months to a year, I don't believe. But it's certainly something we're working towards.
Who's in the Alliance? I probably should know that, but I don't.
No, I can send you a list of, we have representation from senior service organizations, from religious institutions here within Southbury. It's very Southbury specific, but you know, in being fledgling, we haven't even put together. We have to have senior representation on that board as well.
Transportation
So
for seniors is a big issue, and you know, I'm
It
hoping
is.
we can figure out some way to make it work better.
work better. And the other thing too is that I would urge of all of you is to understand, and it's probably, quite frankly, it's probably not a comfortable position to be sitting in your seats, but at some
They're
point,
not comfortable seats. Right?
but at some point, the decision has to be made of how much the town wants to, or is able to do, not wants to do, but is able to do, because I see that number continuing to creep up. At what pace, I don't know, but you know,
Does Heritage Village offer any programs for?
Heritage Village does have transportation, and I was working with Roger Giordano when he was still in the president's role. I had asked him for some numbers. I never ended up getting them, and then there was the transition there, and there's now new leadership. Because we're just trying to find out, are there ways that we can partner? Two previous reach outs to Heritage Village were a little resistant, but that was quite some time ago, and a lot has changed, and Heritage Village has been really receptive, and I think understanding that this is really a collective problem.
Danbury Medical, the Danbury Medical area, there's a group, and they used to provide some bus service for their patients, and that kind of.
I don't want to be too preemptive, Jeff, but there are conversations and reach outs, and that's part of this conversation that started yesterday with the Alliance, we have people that have connections with Danbury as well as having Jeremy from Waterbury on our board. So, you know, when you look at it, in the grand scheme of things, you're really looking at, even if whatever this entity is going to look like, were to purchase a bus, you're looking at under $100,000 investment. And, you know, we're looking at about an average of $24,000 a year. And that does include staff and, you know, other benefits and all of that is all figured into that number. So, you know, you get a couple of big entities that are willing to throw in $5,000 or $10,000. That could be doable.
So this alliance you're talking about is mostly organizations within the town?
It's very Southbury specific.
Okay.
Very.
was
It's all
designed
about
that way.
Southbury and Southbury only. It's Southbury Senior Alliance. We're the largest per capita senior population in the state. These people deserve to have advocates and representation, and we're looking forward to, you know, tackling other, you know, issues. And, you know, we were still putting our organization in place when I started going into kind of DEFCON 4, and they jumped right in and wanted to start to tackle this. So whether it's, you know, maybe a little early for them to want to tackle a big project, it's given them, they're really pretty fired up and want to try to see if we can address this.
Mike, you have a,
Yeah, thank you for coming. I was really disturbed by the memo, by your update. And this confirms that, how disturbed, you know.
Try going home at night after getting those calls.
And
it's
I
horrible.
appreciate and understand, having worked on stuff like this, all the work that goes into developing, you know, safety programs and policies and manuals. But if you don't have staff to train, they sit on a shelf. You know, one thing that I haven't heard here that I think we need to have a greater sense of urgency on, and I think you do, is a plan that puts money aside for now. That if we needed to get to the ideal situation, what would that cost us? What does that look like? That's then on us and the Board of Finance to determine how and if we can get there in phases over time. But what it does appear is some of it's circumstance. You know, you can't predict someone getting ill, but a 20% almost increase in ridership, I assume, didn't happen over 1 month. You started to see the growth, and that has been consistent. We're now in September, so we're 3/4 of the way through the year. So just now seeing this is tough, because a whole year's gone by where our most vulnerable citizens are literally being left behind without a ride, and that's our job. That's our job. So I think what we do need to see is a plan, a recommendation from you as to what is the solution. And don't worry about budgets at this point. That's on us to figure that out. That's on us, because you gave us some, but one bus isn't going to solve the solution either.
No, but
Is it gonna be
it
the
started
solution?
last year when I
Yeah.
asked for the
So-
hourly rate to go up.
Yeah, what's clear to me is that the town appears to be underinvesting in this service, or as George said, needs to come up with another solution that might outsource it. It may cost us more to outsource it than it's been costing us now. But the question is, what does that number look like? And are we willing to make that investment in our most vulnerable population? Listen, we as a town ask the entire town to vote on our school budgets every year, not just those who have kids in the school. And except for 1 year in my last decade here, that budget has passed. Generally, it passes with pretty strong numbers, because it's responsible. It's a responsible budget. We all know that it's a great return on that investment. I think we need to really, I feel it from you, but having it be September at this point, this is urgent.
Yeah.
And it's not, and whether Southbury Senior Alliance, that we can't rely on someone else to do it. So a couple of the questions I have, I'm thrilled that there is a group of advocates local, but I assume they're reaching out to other organizations outside of here. So have we talked to the state about the problem we have, and asked them if there is something they can do? Have we talked to the Western Connecticut area on aging, Agency on Aging? Are there nonprofits that can support us? Have we talked to Connecticut Community Foundation? I just think that we we need to address it, and we need to address it now. This isn't just on you. This is on us. It's going to ultimately then be on the Board of Finance when their numbers put behind it. But this isn't new, really. We know
been
that
here
our
since I
population's
started,
aging.
yeah.
While a spike of 20% may be unexpected, it's hard to predict that big a spike. Like George has said, medical rides, 10% pretty much of medical. Those are literally our most vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's there was one other thing in the report that I do want to discuss, but that to me, it's a major issue. It's a crisis.
So
I don't use that word lightly.
No, and I have been kind of beating on the drum since I started on some of these concerns that I was predicting were going to get out of control, and they have pretty quickly. So, to your point, we have not had a liaison on our board, our senior commission, for almost a year. That's a problem, and I am grateful that you read my report. I got to be honest with you. I kind of was wondering, I'm putting these reports forth and I'm giving this information. My phone isn't ringing. I'm not, and I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but these are concerns that I've had for quite some time. And I'm trying to go through the appropriate channels, and I'm trying to get these things addressed. And I go back to my original comment too, that we need to decide what we're able to be able to provide, because quite frankly, I see the need and the volume continuing regardless of what the money aspect of it looks like.
And I just said, in a situation like this, I'd say to you, when you have someone who we don't have a meeting in between and there's a 3-week gap between our next meeting, and you have somebody you want to hire and make a recommendation, and there is an urgent crisis, the first selectman can gather us if we need to. Whether we do it on the phone, or whether otherwise. We need to, there's clearly, there's a crisis going on in this part of your organization at Senior Services, and we need to.
But this person you just interviewed just finished up, right?
No.
No, just.
No, I've had her. I've had her on my desk, and I was told that this meeting wasn't happening until this evening.
And that's how we lose people. That's how we ultimately lose people, because clearly it's someone who has some time, is looking for some additional income. And in an economy where it's not as hard to find a job today as it was a year ago. The job market's decent. We've got to take action. And when there's a crisis like this, we have to take action with even more greater urgency. So thank you for the update. I do have one other thing about the report.
This person is retiring though, right?
No, she's available now. She's just going to have some time restrictions, but is going to hit the ground running for us. Yeah.
Okay. What's the other?
So the other thing in the report, and it wasn't just this report, but it's been past reports, is what appears to be a pretty significant decline over time in membership numbers. I wanted to, am I reading it right? Am I looking back historically and reading it right? Two, with a growing and aging senior population, that's somewhat surprising to see. So the question I have is, has there been an analysis done as to why that's happening? Yeah. And at some point, and I don't want to take all the time now, but I do think that is a conversation that we together need to have, because if it's about the quality of services we're able to offer, if it's about the not enough of an investment in it, so we can't provide services, so there isn't an appearance of value in becoming a member, and doing it. But that was quite startling. I don't think it's as big a crisis as something that's sort of medical related and with, but these, whether you have a medical issue or not, part of our job also on the other side is to provide quality of life services. Right. And when that membership seems to just be dropping, when the population is going like this, it makes
so I do have an answer for a good portion of that, and that is the software change that we made. And when I had come to you, when we went to Schedules Plus, I explained that we had some really inflated numbers that were happening. Heads were being double counted. The numbers were really askew. So when we were able to bring Schedules Plus on May 1st of 2017, it took about a good month. So now we're at June 1st, so we didn't have a full year. So you'll see that I do my very best to explain that in the annual report that I gave you. So I think that we need to look at when we really are going to have 2 solid years is we have 2018 and 2019. We will have 2 years, full years on Schedules Plus, and I believe that we are going to see some decline. But when you can't draw people in for what our mission statement is really, our existence is to provide programming, to provide, trips and enhanced, lifestyle for our senior population. We're talking about our most vulnerable, but we have a thriving, very active senior population that's looking for us to provide them with activities and programming. And, when we can't get them there, that's a problem, and that's when, then so that's all played. And I'm not, you're absolutely
no, you're right.
right.
And I agree. I've used the phrase our most vulnerable population. I would argue that from a health standpoint, I'm probably more vulnerable than some of our seniors who are far more active.
They're amazing. They really are.
But I think that's important to also, and it is about it. Again, it goes back to is about making smart investments.
Exactly.
And looking forward towards us, and I understand our desire always, in every budget meeting we've sat in over 4 years, to try to have a responsible mill rate. But at some point, the most important investment we make is in our people, whether that's our children or whether our seniors or our families, etc. And at some point, we need to get to a point as a town that we're willing to make that investment. And it just, those declining numbers can only mean that there's a dissatisfaction in the service offering in some ways. Yeah. Some of it I am sure, some of it can be, but the numbers seem significant enough, and in 2 years we'll have, another year we'll have better sense.
Right, exactly.
But they seem significant enough that they might have been somewhat inflated, but I can't imagine that it's the entirety of it.
We actually had a membership of under 1,000 truly when we switched over. But that switchover was indicating a membership of well over 1,000. So.
And what I do think we need to do, even before we have the full numbers, though, is we need, this board, or the next board, whoever is sitting here, needs to, there needs to be a plan in place to address it. Now, not waiting for all the data. You don't need all the data in place to make some assumptions, to make some smart assumptions. And I think that we need to do that because it's important. It's a growing population of our town. It is one of the parts of our town that is both one of our greatest assets and greatest challenges. That we have in terms of how do we serve this multi-generational population. So, but it was the other part of the report that, to me, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk about. So, thank you.
Jason?
So, no, I'll just say it seems to me like with so many things that we have a short-term issue and a long-term issue. So, the stuff that Mike and George are talking about, I think we should look into our plan and what it would cost for third parties and whatnot. But short-term, we do have this issue. So I know you've asked for a number of months the increase in the pay and ability to advertise elsewhere, and that was just implemented over the last few weeks. So would I be correct in saying, we'll have a better sense over the next month or two whether those things are enough or whether you need, are you looking for anything else right now to assist on the short-term goal of getting people in?
I'd love to get a liaison from the board, and I don't want to speak for the commission, but there has been discussion about being willing to change the time to make it more.
I think that's the issue.
I think it is, and we're willing. I mean, it's that important. I know the chair and the vice chair wanted to talk about that with the commission for our September meeting about, the willingness of everyone to change the time to accommodate a liaison from this board. That would help tremendously. One of the finance board members is on our Alliance Art, and he had suggested, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to, request it or not, but he's really suggesting some form of a committee to be formed to take a look at the transportation piece. I'm doing my investigation. Look, I'm the department head there. That's part of what I do. But like I said, it's just, there's a lot going on right now. And there's fires that are going on, as well as, trying to continue some of the enriching program that we have been able to bring on, like the Aging Mastery Program, which is backed by National Coalition on Aging that had never been brought in. And it's a remarkable program, and I've talked about at length with that. But I'm the only one certified to facilitate that class, and in the middle of one of my classes, my drivers were threatening a walkout with 2 full buses sitting in our parking lot because they were just stressed and frazzled. So just some of the dynamics going on.
There was also a time when your transportation coordinator was out for a while, and we backed it up with the floater from Town Hall to back up over there. And then there were 3 long-term illnesses that came into play recently, which made it frustrating. The trouble is you can't back up unless they have a bus license. And, you know, and then we went out and we're looking out further. It's a nationwide issue hiring bus drivers. They're all, you know, the bus companies are all struggling with it. The schools, you know, the school buses and stuff struggle with it. So we did raise the rate. We worked with Dan Colton to fit that in, and there went out further. Indeed, some other newspapers further out.
I hope. I don't know if we're advertising Beyond Voices, to be honest. I don't. And well, I know it's expensive, but if we can, we said
to do it. So
okay.
We said to do it.
Okay.
So we should be doing it. So anyway, we'll see what. Is there anything else we have to?
I could potentially be the liaison. When are your meetings typically held? What time?
They're usually on Wednesday, the 3rd Wednesday of the month, barring holidays, and they're currently at 3.
I can do that if you guys want to send me.
Okay.
I'll talk to my boss.
Really appreciate it.
Well, the question is, if they're considering,
we can change it. We were talking about changing it to the morning.
You wouldn't need to.
Okay.
Okay, because one of the reasons there was some of the senior commission that couldn't drive at night, and it was mostly when it got to be dark early, it was a problem.
No, absolutely, it's a concern. That's why I think the morning, we can certainly change the morning if that's better.
So you want to?
I'm happy to do it. I know a few senior citizens around town.
You have a new liaison.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. I'll send you an email to let you know about our next meeting.
I'll just say that the more I'm hearing, the more it sounds like this really should be farmed out to somebody who has the capability of providing drivers and equipment on a regular basis. It takes all that off your shoulders, and then you can focus on your true mission, which is making a great senior program.
I think possibly, you know, the trips may be able to, if you were consider the trips, but one of the things is you have a wheelchair lift, and I think, don't know how many contract.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there are none. Maybe that's the
Well,
answer.
here's the other thing too is
Maybe it's a business to go into.
What
I could
happens
start
when
a
you
business.
what happens when you float out to people out there in the transportation world that there is this need? You know, entrepreneurs and people that are looking to have a successful model maybe would say it's worth tackling.
I would think a school bus company would have an interest. I mean, they've got a lot of equipment, they've got a lot of drivers. No, you don't like them.
Not that I no, it's not that I don't like it.
There actually is a big school bus driver shortage in the nation.
There's a
Nationwide.
huge,
I
and
mean,
that's
there's
why
no
they don't
problem.
want any
There's no
part of
question.
it, George,
Actually,
because
pulled
they
up.
can't
Okay.
staff their own buses.
It says
I
it
have
on
to
the-
look into it.
It says on the
but-
internet, it's got to be true.
It's the internet.
But no, it's absolutely.
It's the Google.
It's Google it.
Dr. Google told me.
But it has been. It's been a nationwide issue.
Is that because the salary offered is too low?
I don't know. I don't know if it's, you have to have a F endorsement. You know, so you'll have to, it's just part of the,
Yeah.
it's just difficult.
It's strange hours, low pay.
And I'm hearing, I know that I'm supposed to hear, but I'm hearing people call out Lyft and Uber, and they do exist. They do exist for seniors, but somebody's got to pay the bill. Somebody's got to make the call. So it's still, and that's fine. There's also go-go grandparent and go-go grandparent, grandma, grandpa. And we looked into that, and it doesn't sound like it's very well established here in Southbury, and not backed by the Better Business Bureau, and a multitude of complaints. But I think one of our challenges too is we're not an urban, centrally urban type setting, and that, that creates an, or metropolitan, situation. So, those things we have looked into. Problem is somebody's got to pay the bill. Am I going to put that in my budget? I mean, maybe
No, but
I am.
I know we've joked about it a little bit at this point, but the idea of reaching out to some entrepreneurial individuals
Yeah.
who might consider and see a business opportunity, whether the town pays them or otherwise, is not a bad concept to explore.
No, not at all.
So,
And it is underway, so.
all right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Timothy.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is public comment, limited to 3 minutes. If you could give your name, you'd like to come forward and make public comment, and now would be the time.
Barbara Wheeler, Heritage Village. I'm going to say the same thing I said 2 or 3 years ago. This town has a wonderful education. Our senior services should be as good as our education. And that, from what we just heard now, that's not the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine Edelson, Heritage Village. I'm wearing orange today because September is Hunger Action Month. This is about our Harvest Walk, which will be September 15th. I hope I will see you all there. Celebrating Hunger Action Month starts by taking action against hunger. You can help by raising awareness of hunger as a problem even in our community of Southbury. One way of raising awareness is by supporting and joining others in our community at our signature event, the 7th Annual Harvest Walk to End Hunger on September 15th at 1 p.m. This year, our event will start off in Woodbury at Mitchell Elementary School. The Connecticut Food Bank compiles statistics for each town in our state. It is quite hard to believe that in Southbury, over 9.5% of the residents have food insecurity. Woodbury has just a bit less at 8.8%, and Waterbury over 19%. Remember, if you're really struggling in Southbury and you're homeless, you can't stay here, so you end up moving to Waterbury or worse. As our mission statement states, we strive to unite family, faith communities, and other organizations to alleviate food insecurity and address other social justice needs in the greater Waterbury area through cooperative action. The walk is a way to make our local communities aware of these surprising, scary numbers. So I didn't notice any signs around here in the town hall, but I'll look more carefully and hope that I'll see you all there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Other public comments?
Good evening. I am Rich Boritz, and I live in Heritage Village, and I am the Democratic candidate for the first Selectman. Tonight, my comments focus on economic development. You may know that residents feel economic development to be one of the most important issues facing the town. The population of Southbury is predicted to decrease by 3% over the next few decades. To ease the tax burden on homeowners, the business and commercial portion of the town's grand list needs to grow. This will take the effort of town government to attract businesses and to support commercial growth. The person who fills the new Economic Development Director position will be key to growing the town's economy. Southbury has several assets that can help do this. One is Main Street South Streetscape. Another is the Southbury Training School. Third is town-owned land. My objective when I become first selectman is to project Southbury as a business-friendly town open to businesses. To help make this happen, I will task Economic Development Director to create a sustainable plan for growth that balances housing, open space, recreation, shopping, and commercial and industrial development. All of that, though, consistent with the town's plan of conservation and development. As first selectman, I intend to concentrate the town's resources on ensuring town departments will achieve these goals and objectives. I will work to make visual and functional improvements to the streetscape to attract more shoppers and businesses. I will plan to have appropriate sustainable development at the Southbury Training School and on vacant town-owned land. I will work with appropriate agencies to improve the appearance, traffic, and pedestrian flow of the streetscape. Having spent nearly 40 years of my life as a teacher, I know how important a report card is. So I'm going to give you my economic development report card now that you can judge. First, has an achievable economic development plan been approved by the Board of Selectmen by the end of my first term? Second, has the town of Southbury and the state of Connecticut come to mutual understanding of the kind of development that will be appropriate for the Southbury Training School? Third, have steps been taken to improve traffic, pedestrian flow, and the aesthetics of the streetscape? I'm looking forward to having further discussions on this important topic with all of you here and with the residents of Southbury. I truly believe that together we can achieve economic growth that will better serve residents, visitors, and businesses alike. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Good evening, Ed Edelson, Heritage Village. I wanted to share with you some disappointing news. Many of you know that about 40 of us from the village went down to Washington, D.C. last April to see the exhibit at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, specifically because it featured Southbury. While we were there, we learned that the exhibit has been so popular, they've decided to make a traveling exhibit to go around the country. It would be based on a competitive grant issued through the American Library Association. I brought this to the attention of the library to say it would be, I think, a great idea if Southbury would apply to be one of those 50 libraries that would have the museum, would have the exhibit. It's pretty clear to me the 50 number probably came from the idea one would be chosen in every state. I just learned about a week and a half ago that our library decided not to apply. They didn't think it was something that they could support. I find that very disappointing, and if another town in Connecticut is successful in winning it, it's going to be a real embarrassment, as far as I'm concerned, that we have people from Southbury going to see an exhibit that features the Southbury story.
Thanks, Ed.
Any other public comment?
John Gray, Patriot Road. I'm here tonight to apologize to the Board of Selectmen. I was the Vice Chairman of the Charter Revision Committee. It would appear as if the final markup of the charter as delivered to the Board of Selectmen has two serious problems. The first of which is Section 703. The current wording of the proposed change to Section 703 would make it impossible for the town to conduct labor negotiations with unions that work with the town. I am told that the board is well aware of this issue, so I won't belabor it. The second major problem in the proposed charter is concerning 2-year versus 4-year terms. The Commission received little in the way of public comments leading into the charter revision process, but several of the comments that we did receive were that residents wanted the ability to vote for their representatives every 2 years. Many said that 4 years was too long. If the Board of Selectmen remembers the joint meeting between the Commission and the Board on August 5th, the majority of the Selectmen, who are the people who must run the campaigns every 2 years, also favored terms of 2 years. Hearing that all but one of the Commission members agreed to keep the charter at 2-year terms, I mistakenly believed that it was a done deal and the 4-year term proposal would be stripped. I failed to confirm the final markup did not contain this 4-year provision, which it still does. So I would ask the board to either re-impanel the Commission or reject the charter as proposed. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Sharon Wirt and Heritage Village, and I really hadn't planned to make a comment, but when I heard from Mike that there was a diminution of people using the senior center, I think I know an answer for one reason they're not going. I happened to go there with some friends, not to make use of the facility, but just to kind of look around. And I was shocked at how dismal and depressing the place is with all the blank gray walls, empty rooms. It looks more like a warehouse than a senior center, and especially if you compare it with Woodbury's, where there are sofas and comfortable chairs, lamps, bookshelves. You don't see anything like that at the Southbury Senior Center. I think it's a very depressing place, and I think a lot could be done very inexpensively, possibly with volunteer work, just painting alone, some artwork. Go to Goodwill and find some artwork, you know. It would be a simple matter. I think that's one of the problems. I don't know what the other problems are, but.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Sean Murphy. I have a copy of this. I'll give it to the clerk as a courtesy. I would like this, I'm going to read this letter into the minutes, and I request it to be put in the minutes. I moved to Southbury 4 months ago because it is a rare town in Connecticut where property values are stable. People want to move here. I am appalled at what is going on politically. When I first found out that Selectman Naylor wanted to challenge incumbent First Selectman Jeff Manville, I asked why. It is unheard of for a Republican town committee to dump an incumbent without a clearly stated reason. I have never received a response to my question from Selectman Naylor, the RTC, or any of her supporters. As I inquired more, I started to see what is really going on. I did get repeatedly attacked on Facebook by her social media goon squad, a common tactic by people who have something to hide. Some people know I have been active in other towns I've lived in. The people misbehaving will soon find out firsthand what I'm really about. Southbury has the same problems every other small town in Connecticut has. There are people who are interested in their own agendas, getting themselves or their friends into power, special treatment, and no big town contracts. We have 2 Republican selectmen, Naylor and Bucksbaum, who have worked against Jeff Manville and Selectman Bertram for their own agenda. Not what is best for the town, what is best for them. The Democrats, if given power, will put Ed Edelson and his cronies back in charge. The whole attempt to dump Manville is about one thing, putting their people in power so they can control things. The Republican Town Committee has their people, so do the Democrats. We have a charter revision proposal whose key tenet is gender pronouns. Are you kidding me? We have a mess of a local ambulance situation. Every selectman voted for a proposal that allowed Southbury Ambulance to get a monopoly with minimal accountability on 2 of the 3 services. We have lost a 24/7 ambulance because Southbury Ambulance is not required to staff at what are clearly proper levels. The town has no real recourse. Only Selectman Bertram is honest enough to admit he made a bad vote. We have multiple reports of people waiting 25 minutes for an ambulance. We have had to call in out-of-town ambulance because ours are not available. This is completely unacceptable. The head of Southbury Ambulance was quoted in the News Times admitting we need more ambulance staffing, and then accusing them of writing fake news on Facebook. I was accused of being paid by the Manville campaign for my online commentary on the topic. The current ambulance situation has put all of us in jeopardy, and if allowed to continue, someone is going to die over this. I have been able to answer the question about what Mr. Manville has done wrong. Number 1, he cares about the integrity of the process. He will not do special favors, give no-bid contracts to friends, or ignore fraud, waste, and abuse by government. He cannot be bought off or intimidated. Number 2, he does not play political games.
That's been 3 minutes. It's limited to 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Kathy DeCarly, Flag Swamp Road. Can I see that? I just want to make sure I don't misquote anything. Two things. One, the reason why Jennifer and Jason are running against Manville is because it is a free country, and that is their right to do. And 2, I'm concerned about the threat you just made to the whole town.
That was not a threat.
Okay,
What did
okay,
you-
okay.
The exact,
Please.
what exactly did you mean by that statement then?
We have to address the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, I'm
It's a
I'm
board-
concerned.
It's a board meeting.
I understand. I'm just a little upset, so I'm a little off my game. So I'm just concerned what exactly was meant by that threat that he just gave
I
the
don't
entire
know.
town.
You're making public comment, you can make public comment.
That's my public comment. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
Kathy.
time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Mrs. Barnes, Lovelock Road, Southbury. And it was very pleasant for 4 years to come to board meetings and have some kind of continuity and cooperative work with the Board of Selectmen and the First Selectman. In the last couple of weeks, that has gone totally out the door. I would like to first say that it's very sad commentary that the Republican Party has allowed the old Republican Guard to rear its ugly head and cause dissension among the members of this party. They would therefore allow a Democrat to walk in the door, and then we would return to the prior of the 4 years that Mr. Manville has served under the Democratic rule, where we had a lot of dissension, believe me. We do not need that. And what just transpired now, when a person comes to the microphone, they are not supposed to directly engage with someone else who has made prior comments. And I had that unfortunate experience probably over a year and a half or so ago when I came to the microphone at public comment and made my concerns regarding mental health that was needed for people who have issues regarding gun violence. The gentleman who is now running for the First Selectman on the Democratic ticket came to the microphone after me and began to degrade my comments and personally attack me. That is not appropriate. That is a point of order. And the current First Selectman, Mr. Manville, did call point of order that evening and stopped the gentleman who is now, excuse me, maybe I shouldn't use gentleman because he was not courteous that night, who began to degrade me, okay? I think a First Selectman should be courteous and have an even-keeled demeanor. That is one that the gentleman who is now running for the Democrat First Selectman position did not present that evening. And I also agree on the fact that we should have 2-year terms for the Board of Selectmen. And Mr. Rosen, I'd like to commend you for making the comment that our current economy is doing well. I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any? One left that we know of.
Maybe something a little lighter. I really don't need this. As
You have
some
3
people-
minutes. You have 3 minutes.
All you need is 2 seconds, essentially. I have an invitation.
Could you, your name?
My name is Judy Katzmark. I live in Heritage Village. I serve on the board of the Lutheran Home of Southbury. The Lutheran Home will be celebrating, finally. It was in 18 that we were founded, but we're not able, because of the construction, to have our celebration until the 14th of this month. So each of you is getting an invitation to come up to the Lutheran Home. If you have not seen it, you need to come and see what's happening there.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Okay. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Announcements and correspondence. Just want to remind everybody the volunteer picnic coming up, and it'd be nice to see everybody there. Any questions on that? Can we go to, are you whispering back there? Oh. Consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, made and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. Okay. Minutes of the August 15th, 2019 regular meeting. Mike? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
We going around the table?
Yeah, we're gonna split it up to
Everyone gets a
everybody.
turn?
Trying to prove we can actually get along again.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions, and it carries. Bids and procurements, truck is up for replacement. Same bid as the others that we have. Have a motion, George?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening, Jeff.
We're-
I was looking
Thank
at
you,
something.
somebody was listening.
Very honest.
I
Honest
was
George.
looking at, I
Honest
got an email when I was
It's your,
reading
it's
the
your turn to
email.
make a motion.
But Jennifer
You can
beat
second it, you can second it.
I'll make the motion.
No, Jennifer did. She already grabbed the
You can only
spot.
second.
Oh, I'll second it then. Are you talking about the truck?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's gonna happen, so.
So
We're
let's,
always
any
good
discussion
at
on the
buying
truck? Hearing none?
Yeah, no
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. Okay. Moving on to the tough one of the night is the charter revision.
We didn't go through the tough one of the night yet.
No, well-
I feel like we did.
Charter revision. The attorney could not be with us here tonight. Lynn Dwyer is here from the town clerks. We are on a timeline. So there's a number of questions that were in the charter. That we may want to pull out of the charter for ballot or not. We have some options, and Lynn, do you want to explain, make sure we all understand those options here on the charter? Did you want to explain the options on the charter?
Well, there's really.
She's come to the mic, Jeff.
Today is the 5th, which unfortunately is the last day, because tomorrow questions have to go to the Secretary of State. And the ballot with the questions has to go to the printer, he has to verify it, and the ballot's going to stay printed after the 11th. So the option is either it's amended, you do not have to accept the whole question, all the questions.
Lynn, could you come to the microphone? Sorry to interrupt you, I just,
Yeah, it's good.
you're on a roll. No, I just, sorry about that.
Well, I got this just in case anybody really had a question, but this is the election calendar that's done by the state, and it says that the questions on the ballot is September 5th is the last day for a municipality to approve the questions that would appear on the ballot, for the reasons below that the ballot gets printed next week. And I did put one of the options is you can look at the questions and amend the ones that you want, reject the others, or you can do nothing, reject it, and within 45 days, a petition could come through, and then we'd have to have a referendum. And then you wouldn't really have a choice on the questions either.
When you say questions, when you say we can accept or reject, we're not talking about the question. We haven't gotten to the question part yet. First, we need to accept or reject the charter changes.
Right.
So we can accept the whole charter, or we can reject portions. Okay. And then,
Can we amend portions?
no.
If there is an error.
It says not, let's see, this is the statute number 7191D. And this one is okay. Let's see. The appointing authority, which is the Board of Selectmen, by a majority vote of its entire membership, shall either approve the proposed charter amendments or reject the same or separate provisions thereof. Separate provisions thereof, I'm not really sure. It's either reject or separate parts. So that's why I was saying questions.
Sounds
That's
like
how-
you can reject things, but you can't modify something. You can't change the
No,
wording.
because that was up to the Charter Commission.
So, oh, we open first. Thank you.
Mike?
So as part of public comment, there was one issue brought up regarding the charter, regarding a provision that's alleged to, prevent negotiation with unions, I guess. This charter, the charter revisions that were put forth to us, based on my understanding and reviewing of the minutes and reviewing memos, was reviewed by town council. Did town council miss that? Or is the allegation that was made incorrect? Because if we cannot modify the agreement, we could, that's something we could choose to pull out, potentially, and if we think should stay as is. So that's my question. This was reviewed by
Pulled out. It is pulled out.
Right,
I mean,
well,
the
it doesn't have to
recommendations
be.
for the questions
Right.
from the attorney. So,
No, we got to separate the discussions here.
That's right.
The
Conflating.
questions we don't get to until we first accept or reject portions of the charter.
Right.
So Mike's on accepting or rejecting portions of the charter.
Right.
So section 703, we had a long discussion about that. We sent Dan back to talk to John Michaels and the Board of Finance, and we added a threshold to that one for $100,000, so it wouldn't be too inhibiting. But I think it might, I saw Dan here earlier. I think it might make sense for him to comment on it, because I actually had a conversation with him about this section 2 weeks ago.
Dan, can you?
It does mention labor contract right in the word.
That's why I talked to Dan 2 weeks after our police meeting. Because I had that question in my mind. What happens with our current, like we're doing the current police contract, what would have happened if this provision was in place?
Without getting into the details
Right.
of the contract, for this particular police contract, we wouldn't have had to have done the fiscal analysis for the Board of Finance based on the value over 3 years. But had it gone over the threshold, yes, we would have had to have, if the charter passes as is, we would have had to have done a fiscal analysis for the Board of Finance. They would have had to have approved it, which put a time frame on the labor negotiations. Especially with the police, when we finalize and go to the board for you guys to approve what we've TA'd with the union negotiations, that would put added time onto having that contract ratified first by us and then by them. And it might be tough if the Board of Finance comes back and says, no, we can't approve this contract, then to have to go back after we've already had a handshake agreement with the union and say, sorry, the Board of Finance just threw this out.
Does this section give the Board of Finance veto power, though?
It sounds like it does when I read it.
I think it does.
Yes.
Well, that's another question I had, because as you read it, it says, can't accept by any department until the Board of Finance has received and has no more than 35 days to give due consideration to a financial impact statement. Such financial impact statement to be prepared by the finance director and submitted to them. Doesn't necessarily say, we would probably listen to them, like if they came back to us and said, no, this is really bad, but I'm not sure it gives them veto power. It gives them sort of a say, like make them part of the discussion.
It does use the word approved in there, and if the Board of Finance fails to take action.
If they don't do anything, yeah.
So it sort of says that they're approving or disproving, but you're right, it doesn't really nail it down.
And we just had this with not from this particular negotiations, but I know when the teachers' contract came up last year, the same situation happened where the Board of Finance was going to review the contract, and they did review it in 35 days and went back, and it was fine.
But that was the finalized.
Finalized,
Right.
yes.
And the Board of Finance reviewed it, but they had no power. They can look at it, but there wasn't a lot of power to reject.
Yep, and I spoke to John Michaels in particular about this latest collective bargaining agreement that we just kind of are at that point, and made him aware of what the value was, and we spoke about this particular situation, and he said for this one, we wouldn't have had to, would have been a nice to have for us to do a fiscal analysis, which we would do anyway for the Board of Finance, but it wouldn't have been something that they would have required.
But
Why
if we
not?
give them,
It was under the threshold, the 3-year threshold.
So the $100,000 is the total impact over 3 years?
Yes.
And this is less than that?
Yep.
Okay.
how close to that threshold?
It was over half.
It was over half, yes, without getting too much into the details
Yeah.
until,
No, I'm just wondering, is that threshold give the town the flexibility? And mostly the concern is be able to do these contracts and get, obviously, we want to get them done for a number of reasons. One, for the town, but also for our officers,
Yep.
too. We want to get them in there and get,
and actually, the last time we went through the, in particular, the police contract, it wouldn't have been affected by this as well. So it didn't hit the threshold that time either.
Would it be possible to extract the 2 words labor contract from the last line on page 29 and just get around it?
But we can't change it now.
We can't make
You
any
can
changes.
extract things, right?
You can accept it or deny it, reject it.
Right.
I thought we could extract things.
Well, we could
pull
pull
the whole
section
point.
703 out as a separate question, but we cannot
But we can't
modify it. We cannot
Right.
modify it.
We
and
can't
then put
modify
it
the
in.
intent of it and
Right,
make it a separate
right.
question. No, we can't do that.
And-
But I still do come back to the question that town council reviewed this and seemingly had no issue with it. Am I correct in that assumption? You know what we say about assuming, so.
This was not identified as something, when we discussed it, that we were going to pull out as a question.
No, the only thing that you had given me guidance to was to go back to the Board of Finance, because there was no threshold in there.
Right.
And when we went back and I spoke to the Board of Finance, they came up with the $100,000 threshold.
And we actually discussed that number amongst ourselves, like, so.
No, but part of my point is that
Council reviewed it.
council reviewed it, said it wouldn't put us in a position of, my assumption is when council's reviewing a document like this, the primary part of it is it compromising the town in any way, shape, or form that might risk some form of financial liability or disable us from doing something?
So
nothing was.
Well, it delays the process a little bit.
It doesn't have to, though.
Right.
I
don't
think-
believe it has
I
to.
think the way
That's
you
my-
deal with this
They
is you
get
put a
up
member of the
to
Board of
35
Finance.
days, but I would think that you could, based on the fact that, Dan's been party to the negotiations right along, I mean, he could have that work mostly done.
We had the analysis done before we finished negotiations, so yeah, where we'd run into a problem is in the summer when the Board of Finance doesn't convene, not that they couldn't convene.
Well, we'll just make a phone call to Maine and.
If we're that
get
deep
things
into
taken care of.
negotiations and we're not doing a fiscal analysis on
Exactly.
something like that,
Yes.
shame on us, and that's not the nature and history of the town.
Yep.
So-
No, and yeah, we would have this already completed before we're even at that point where it gets to you guys.
Well, I think in
Seems
this
like you
case,
can-
you did the fiscal analysis.
We did,
Yeah.
yes.
Because that's what I was asking you after we met, like the documents we all saw, that's essentially
basically
the
that would be the
fiscal
analysis, yes.
that, so you could pull the Board of Finance together, just like we pull the Board of Selectmen together to get authority and thresholds and whatnot.
in executive session.
Right, in the middle of the process.
I'd ask, what is the definition of taking action? So if the Board of Finance within 35 days, action was to table discussion or postpone discussion, that is an action. Is that taking action? If there's no discussion about it, there's no action whatsoever there, the item shall be considered approved. What happens if, well, yeah, I'm saying.
In this particular case, I think with this contract negotiation, 35 days would probably be too long to wait.
Right. Well, the other question I have is, in this case with the police contract, you did the analysis.
Yes.
Why does the Board of Finance
They
again
would-
have to do the analysis?
They don't know. They want to review my analysis
Okay.
as the fiscal director. They would like to review the analysis.
The issue, the same issue came up when I was on the Charter Revision Commission, when the way it was explained to me by John at that time was, the Board of Selectmen goes and does things throughout the year, right? We might, there may be something in the budget, you can, but, you might enter into a contract or do something that now has long-term implications to the town, and, the Board of Finance would have taken great care with that during the budget season, and it's sort of left out of the process later on. And I think that's their concern.
Yep. And I think with most of these negotiations, the Board of Selectmen actually give us the parameters going in anyway. So you guys have given us the parameters before we even met with the contract negotiation. So we basically had the analysis done at our first meeting, and then through negotiations, tweak that every week that we met with them, or every month that we met with them.
I don't know if this is a check or an extra check in the process. Justin, you've been on the Board of Finance, so you'd be more familiar with the issues over the years if we had any.
No, I mean, they're very hands-on, and rightly so. So I'm not surprised that they would want to take a look at something like this at the end.
But as you were on the Board of Finance for many years, did longer than we've been sitting out, you were on a lot of years. And if there was issues coming before the board, you were aware of them.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And that board doesn't meet in July and August typically, but I do recall times where something came up. We got the chairman on the phone, and we did what had to be done. So I have no doubt that would still be the case moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with Justin. I think at any point that any one of us can make a call and have at least a quorum of the Board of Finance together to look at this and review it, and John is always available.
I mean, I love the intent, it's just the concern of...
That was the concern we raised.
Every 2 years.
That's why we added the threshold. I mean, without the threshold, this provision made no sense whatsoever.
Yep.
It was, really tying people's hands.
That's in the approved, that's in the approved revision, correct? For the
This is the red line final version.
Right.
The red line final version, there's a clean final version if you want to see.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's way up at top. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted, it's in the red line final version with that.
As I read this, it seems clear that this gives the Board of Finance approval, control on the contract. Am I wrong? It's sort of vague, it's not worded.
It's vague, but that's the way I kind of read it as
Yeah,
well, that
yeah.
they would, for us to ratify the contract, if it was over $100,000, they would have to review it.
I mean, the last two sentences use the word approval and approved, and that sort of indicates that they have the right to approve or disapprove.
It's a power grab. It's a power grab by the Board of
Excuse me,
Finance.
sir, it's a board meeting.
I just want George to-
It's a board meeting, sir.
Do you have any historical data of how many contracts?
I look back over the last two police contracts and with the Teamsters, and the three of those would not have been impacted by this.
So that's good news because
And all of those, including my predecessor, did a fiscal analysis for every one of the contracts that we've entered into.
and the good news is that by the time that, only because of inflation and increased cost over time, that this $100,000 threshold would not be met until the next charter revision where the number could be changed. That's my concern. 4 years, 4 years down the road, we don't bump that. I mean, you know, for inflation, you don't anticipate that?
No, it's a 3-year right now, once it's
2
reviewed.
years after that.
And then we have the Teamsters coming up this summer, so I assume that would be another 3-year.
The question that I have, in the police contract negotiation process, we kept everything very secretive and confidential. There was no taking of documents outside of the room sometimes. And in the transfer of information to the Board of Finance, is there a risk that that information might get out into the public somehow? And I'm not sure how that would work. Would they have an executive session on it, or how would they do it?
Yeah, the ground rules during the negotiations were pretty clear that we could not discuss outside of negotiations what we were discussing in that room. So we would have to, in the analysis, we'd probably have to do it as very vague as possible. Just as you guys saw that analysis, maybe take out everything but just the numbers.
I didn't think about that, because I wasn't involved in that end of it.
Well, we didn't even tell you what was going on there.
Yeah, the ground rules were clear that we could not discuss anything outside of negotiations outside of the room.
So if those ground rules are in place, does that put us in?
I don't know if it would, solely because this would be done at the end of negotiations. So it wouldn't be during, we wouldn't be doing an analysis during, even though we would, but we wouldn't let anyone see that analysis until it went to you guys to vote first. And then we would either do an executive session with the Board of Finance. And I'd have to talk to Bill Ryan, our labor attorney, to see exactly what we can and can't, based on the ground rules show to the members of the Board of Finance.
So I certainly do think there is some truth to that. This is, there is an attempt here to exert a greater degree of control over large spending, large 100,000 plus spending, and I think having that number in there is important, by the way. I don't read this, nor have I read this, as giving the Board of Finance right of approval. Due consideration does not mean that they have the right to approve or reject anything. What I read this as saying is that within the parameters listed here, that they have to be given due consideration. Now, I don't know, and perhaps Jason would chime in here, if due consideration as a legal term is the equivalent of approval. I don't believe it is, but I'm not a lawyer. I would assume that town council would have raised that red flag if that was taking the approval process out of the hands of the Board of Selectmen, where that approval ultimately should reside. And like I said before, the failure to take action with 35 days, that language, but again, there is the concern of what take action means. But I still don't, there's nothing I read within this statement that in any, at least common definition of language, gives them approval.
Except the word approved is used
Where?
twice in the
The word
paragraph.
approves there, but where does it say that?
When I read it, it sort of indicates to me that they have the right to approve or disapprove.
Where?
Due consideration is, what does that mean? It's just
Right,
means
that's-
they're looking, giving it a good look, good review, and that's all that means to me. It's in the, once in the second to the last sentence and once in the last sentence in that red line paragraph. Yeah, it helps when you printed it out, actually. They wasted a whole bunch of paper doing it. Well, it could be something that Jeff Tinley missed. I mean, he just maybe didn't pick it up. I don't know. But it concerns me. It's vague, and I don't understand exactly what it means, and what power does it give the Board of Finance. Concerned about the confidentiality issues and moving all this information around. I guess we could handle that somehow. I don't know. Tough one.
You know, if you look in terms of even negotiations, it could be used as a tool as well as you go in, because as you go in to negotiate these things, you could say the Board of Finance is never going to approve this. You know,
That's true.
and I think that may have been part of the intent as well.
I don't know if this was an intent specifically for, I think it's more the intent here was to make sure we didn't enter into a grant.
To obligate,
Yeah,
to not
those were the,
obligate.
that was the conversation, right?
Because-
And we agreed to that larger number because, you know.
Because what happened, there happened, you know, there's some grants that we've gotten that,
This goes back to the historic building grant that we got.
right, thank you.
That forced us to put a $30,000 roof on a building that's the same size as some of the sheds in your backyard. That's where this is all coming from. And hey, you know, maybe that's the only time this will come up, but that's not how our Board of Finance is operated. They like to, you know, look down the line as far as they can. I got a ton of respect for all those guys and gals. They do a great job. And personally, I'm comfortable with this language, because basically the default stance is approval. After 35 days, it gets approved, unless we
Unless
hear.
they table it.
Yeah, unless we hear from our friends on finance that there's a problem, so. And I think we've heard from Dan a pretty simple workaround when we get into these union negotiations, so.
Yeah, and from the fiscal office standpoint, I don't really feel that this is too much of a handcuff, only based, because we had most of the analysis done before we even get to the final contract agreement.
And I think part of the concern also was and I think this was when we were talking about it, was the idea of a pocket veto from the Board of Finance, frankly. And I don't think that, I don't have any issues with the language as written, especially hearing from, you know, our finance director, that he doesn't see it as a hindrance to anything. And certainly hearing from Justin, who, you know, who served as vice chair of the Board of Finance, so.
To intentionally postpone or table it is something I don't see them doing. To just,
No.
to prevent, so
No, and
I
it
don't know
still
why there's
doesn't
even
give
an
them
issue.
the, and it still, even
Right.
that is not a pocket, it would not, because we can address that, I believe, with them. And, you know, it makes an assumption that, you know, that I just don't see it. I think the language, I am comfortable with the language, especially after one, hearing from Dan, and two, that it was reviewed by town council, and three, that, you know, someone who experienced this in trouble.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Other issues?
Okay, the other, are there questions you want to put on?
Are there any other content issues?
Content issues?
The only, based on all the discussions we've had, I think all of us were clear in our discussions that we were happy to send most of this charter to the voters and then split off certain questions that we thought might be of interest. And the one issue that we kept coming back to was the terms. That's the issue that we discussed at length, and we all, at least five of us, I think, thought that 2 terms made sense, and all the comments we got were 2 terms. And we met with the Charter Revision Commission. You know, we re-articulated that and whatnot. So I'm comfortable sending the whole charter to the voters, subject to coming up with separate questions on certain things, but that's the one item that I think might warrant further discussions to see where we all stand on that currently.
On the
So
two-year,
we
four-year.
2-year.
Are we bridging to
Nope, we're still in this.
questions or still?
No, it's still on
Still on
content.
Yeah, I am, and I think I have to look back through our last minutes,
What did I say?
which we approved. But I've heard from enough people that I do think that, and we'll get to this as we get to the next part of this, but the one question I would pull out is that question, and make that a separate issue. Make that a separate issue beyond that, because I do think that is the one thing that I really heard from people on both sides of the aisle, people who are unaffiliated, that there's not broad support for that. So it is really the only issue, and I think it would be a shame, and I'd hope people wouldn't vote on one issue, but I do think that's a big thing, and would. So that's the one, but I'd be comfortable pulling that one question out from a two-term, because I'm comfortable with two terms.
That's from a question standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm asking from a charter standpoint, whether we should pull it out of the charter altogether or not. That's the.
Like, don't put it out. Yeah.
Don't, what'd you say?
We reject that one thing.
Right.
What I was saying is, I'm comfortable with the whole charter. This is the one issue that we kept coming back to that we all had an issue with, or most of us had an issue with. So I thought it warranted further discussion as to what we wanted to do with this term issue. Clearly, if we keep it in, absolutely, that needs to be a separate question.
Right, so your point is, do we reject that change?
Right.
So it doesn't even go
So
to
it
an
doesn't even
independent
go in.
separate question later.
I say, for me, I heard from people here, I think what I'm hearing it from most of the people is that they want to retain the power to elect their officials every 2 years, is what I'm seeing.
I'm hearing that too. The only problem I have with that is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only board in town that serves for 2 years. The rest of them are all for 4. You know that old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I agree. I mean, we did not hear a lot of support for it. But I think that's why the charter revision keeps coming back to it and keeps proposing it, is for uniformity. We all know it'd make our lives a little bit easier. But I think it's going to be incumbent on the next charter revision committee to educate everybody about why they're doing this. Because there's not enough support for it right now. There clearly is not.
Mike? Yeah, because I don't think that and I think that last point is the right thing. I don't think anyone is putting this forth as a concept of wanting to hold on to seats longer. It's about putting the Board of Selectmen in a position to be more effective, to be more efficient, and to be more consistent with the rest of how our town government operates. So I would not, Frank, I'm going to change I would not be comfortable rejecting the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission and not putting it to the people for consideration. The Charter Review Commission, I've reviewed the minutes. The minutes are quite clear of the discussion that happened. So and even the joint meeting that we were in, that was, I think, it wasn't about rejecting it. It was about the conversation we had when we all spoke in that joint meeting was really more about let the people decide. We talked more about pulling that out as a separate issue than we did about outright rejecting that recommendation from bipartisan Charter Review Commission. And I, there's been a lot of talk in town over the last month or so about letting the people decide. Let the people decide. Now, I don't think we should be doing it across the board, but on this one issue, I would not reject the recommendation. I would put it to the people.
I think we build historic knowledge. If by the number of people it's rejected by or approved by, we'll learn something from it. And for that reason alone, I think I would leave it in. Personally, I think I'm very, very comfortable with 2-year terms, but because the charter revision, like you say, bipartisan group of people got together and made this recommendation, I'm comfortable putting it to the voters to do it. But I believe it's really just going to be for historical data purposes.
So for me, yes, I heard from the people here. I don't think it will garner the support in the public. I think the way it's happening, the 2 and the 4, and staggering is a concern to mine. They're trying to fix in the charter, and I've said this, was a complete replacement of the board with all new members. It didn't go wrong. We still worked. It didn't have big issues. You know, if it was going to the people for a straight 4-year switch from 2-year to 4-year, I would be comfortable with that question on a straight. This election is a 2-year election. Next election is 4 years for the whole entire Board of Selectmen, rather than, I think the staggering, what you're seeing is it's minority rule gets into the mix. I don't know if executing that is going to be the cleanest way for our constituents to elect their boards. And that's,
I'd be more comfortable with the 4-year thing if it didn't have that split election. I think the split election is a problem. The off-year one will be a very low turnout election. It'll be probably the two minority representatives against one majority representative, and then the minority folks will throw in a third one. So you're gonna have like 3 people running against one, essentially, in a low turnout election. I don't think that gives you a good sampling of voter preference. So I'd be totally against that. I'm not in favor of 4 years. I think we've heard so clearly from so many people. I can only think of one person that came out in public comment speaking in favor of 4 years. I think that was Mr. Edelson, as I recall. I haven't heard anybody else in any of the people I've heard in public comment or in any of the people I've spoken to that favor the 4 years over the 2. So to me, it's like we're almost disrespecting the will of the people by doing this. I hear what you're saying, Jennifer, and getting a sampling, and maybe that's a reason to do it because it gives you a gauge of what people really think. But if we just go by what we've already heard from public comment and from talking to other people, that's going to get rejected. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it.
Mike?
So I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with the language here. We heard from a teeny tiny, this is a somewhat ironic conversation. We've heard from a teeny tiny representation of our town. Teeny. How many people do we think we've heard of? Really, from public comment. Forget those we might have heard one-on-one.
24 max?
Maybe 25? We haven't heard much public comment at all, frankly, unfortunately, on the charter as a whole.
If you do a sampling of a population,
well,
all
there are
25 are against it. Then
there are similar sampling events that go on in politics that, I've been hearing a lot of the other side of that story. So what I'm saying is, let the people decide. Let the people decide. Let us put forth the question, and let the people decide. Let the full population of Southbury, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, let them decide. The Charter Review Commission put it forth. We can agree or disagree to the term. I was one of them who spoke out in favor of a 4-year term, by the way, for some of the reasons that we've spoken about here. Let the people decide. I do not believe that if it did pass, which I'm not going to pass judgment on whether or not it would, I don't think this would compromise town services in this format. But let the people vote. Should we vote on whether or not we're keeping this?
I'm just...
We have until midnight, by the way.
To approve the questions.
Justin, you know, I don't know. You have any input to this? This 4, I have a problem with the 4 and the 2 and the,
No, I don't have a problem with that as much. Just read that again. Yeah, I mean, I understand the concern that there may be some low turnout, but at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon all of our citizens to go out there and pull the lever. I mean, I'd really like to see these numbers improve, and I know it's not just our town, but no, I think this should go to the people again and let them vote on it. We think we know what's going to happen, but
You never?
you know, people get surprised at elections.
Could be very high turnout.
So just for purposes, I guess, of our, of our record, because we don't have votes to reject it, so it's not being rejected. As I've articulated at past meetings, and I was on the last Charter Revision Commission where we rejected this, I think 2 years is appropriate. And, you know, as this goes to referendum, that's what I'll be advocating for people to stick with the 2-year terms. Because I think accountability is the most important element. That's from 5 years ago, from when I was on the Charter Revision Commission. That, to me, that's what resonated most with me then. That's what resonates with the most with me now. I think you got to face the voters, and if you're doing a good job and people like you, they'll reelect you. And if not, you know, and if they want a whole new board, they get a whole new board. And you know, our electorate here in Southbury, I've found, especially with the last Charter Commission, we're going to get into this, you know, one of these questions about splitting the race of First Selectman and Board of Selectmen. I was surprised when the electorate voted that down last time, and then I was also kind of like happy because I'm like, this, you know, our electorate actually is educated about what they're voting on and understand the issues, and they made a decision to vote for one and not the other. So personally, I think 2-year terms is appropriate, but clearly we don't have votes to reject it, so I think we should just move on and decide whether there's any other issues we need to discuss rejecting. If not, I think we should move on to approving the charter and then getting into questions.
I have nothing else that I want to reject. So.
okay.
Was $10,000 the number we said for grants? That's the only last one I have, 70.
The one we just were talking about.
Was that the $100,000?
No, this was just the, no, that's different. This is the section 708. Is this a little bit of because I think the word grants is in the other section, right? That requires the fiscal analysis. I mean, there's a little bit of, I think we might have missed something here.
So this is grants over 10,000.
Yeah.
One thing I'll mention, though, reading this section, I think makes the language of the other section, the other section is vague.
Right.
And ultimately, it's up to, you know, it's going to be up to town attorney to interpret the sections of the charter and decide what they mean. But this section clearly gives the Board of Finance veto power. This type of language is not in the other section.
Yeah, and the language just in 704 explicitly says the first select person together with the finance director may approve such request provided that the amount of such request or the aggregate of all requests involving the same budget line items made by such agency within the same fiscal year does not exceed $10,000. So it is consistent with that. This is saying anything over. All such approvals shall be reported to the Board of Finance at some scheduled meeting. So, and then it's just want to make sure I'm reading this right. That's transfer funds. Hold on, I might have hit the wrong section. It's hard to go backwards in here. 10,000. Here it is. This does give, I mean, that's interesting. That is, I think that's a good point, Jennifer, that you pulled out there. That does give explicit veto power to any grant application over $10,000. And in some ways,
This one even more directly goes to the issue Justin was raising.
Yeah.
That's the,
That directly addresses.
It's the same
what did he say? Is that a new section?
they're both new, yeah, that's a new section.
That's a total new, 704 would be, 708 total would be new?
That's all new.
That's a whole new, right? There was no 708. Yeah. Because it does say, it does conflict a little bit. Because this says all grant applications in excess of 10,000 must be submitted for approval by majority vote. Section 703 says the following section shall apply to terms totaling over $100,000 in a fiscal year. No grant, gift, or real or tangible personal property, labor contract, other contract with a term beyond 12 months, or a modification, blah, 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 shall be accepted until the Board of Finance has received and has 35 days to give due consideration. This, in theory, would give them veto approval over anything over, any grant over $10,000, and that conflicts with 703.
And not to mention, it takes, it just delays the process.
I would
I
actually.
know we talked about this, but I think we
Yeah,
just missed something.
So, in having seen this, and thank you for bringing it up, Jennifer, this is a section actually, having seen it in context now, again, after that last discussion, I think this is, as a whole, I think we should reject this section. I think it is the intent of the 703 was to protect us from what we consider significant potential financial liabilities based on grants or other potential expenditures.
How did we come up with 10,000? I know we talked about this.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, so.
It was 11 o'clock.
As I look backwards, I would actually, this is a section in whole that I would reject, because this is government getting in the way of itself.
We have to
take a vote.
Reject all of sections.
The entire 708. I'd be in favor of that. I think it's, like you say, it's just over-regulation on a fairly small amount of money.
Anyone else?
So we can reject.
We can cut it.
We can cut it.
We can just cut it.
Feels good.
I'd like to make a motion to reject the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission explicit to Section 708 grants.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion?
Is that proper wording?
It's perfect.
Okay.
No discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. So Section 708 will be rejected from the charter. We don't want to reject the $100,000 section, right?
No, that's next.
That 703 stays, yeah.
703 stays.
703 is good.
We could and just to be clear, we can reject the modification, we could reject R and stay at 2-year terms.
R is brand new.
Or we just rejected.
Oh, which one, what page?
What are you looking at?
You're on 24.
Well, I'm going back to R on page 24 of 39.
Right, but that's a whole new thing that we didn't even talk about.
Oh, I'm
Where
sorry,
are we?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I've got 40 pages on mine. You got 39, well, that's.
No,
Oh, strategic plan committee.
no, I want to go back to the 2-year, 4-year. We do not want to, we want to,
We decided that
Leave it.
we're leaving it, right?
Instead of,
We
you
didn't
know,
take
instead of
we'll
just
get to the
going,
question.
rejecting it and
Well,
staying.
we didn't even take a
I would
vote.
take it out myself, but that's just me.
If someone wants to make a motion, we can then vote.
We
on it.
I mean, we all discussed,
discussed
and
Discussed
there
it,
was,
you know,
there was,
I wasn't gonna
Change
make a
their mind.
motion, because I
There's
didn't think it
no,
was gonna go anywhere, so I just.
there was no vote.
It's okay.
Just go with it, yeah.
It's okay to vote nay occasionally.
Okay. All right.
What's the terminology? Approve the proposed charter. I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed charter as, with the exception of section 708, which we rejected.
second.
Second.
Sorry, she beat you to it.
Didn't hear.
Jennifer did. Okay, any discussion on that? So I want to make sure this doesn't, we're going to put these questions out.
We're going to talk about
That's
those
next.
now.
We're approving the charter
Yeah.
minus 708,
Now we're gonna do.
minus
questions.
708,
We're
and
gonna
then we
do
move to how we
questions.
put it to the people.
Okay.
It's just bad timing
Yeah.
that today's the deadline for the ballot. Otherwise, these would be separate
Coming
meetings.
later.
Right, so.
Right. Okay,
We have to vote.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. All right. Next, I guess, is questions. For the ballot, right?
Who actually writes the precise wording of the questions? Is that done after we leave by somebody, or
Tinley,
do we?
this is that.
These we can
This,
change.
yeah, these we
These
can
are-
change, by the way. We're not
This
married
we
to
can
this
change,
language.
but
we have
once
to
we
decide
tweak it-
tonight what the explicit language is.
I don't have that.
If you don't decide tonight, you could decide to have a special
Do I have that?
within 15 months.
Well, where did it come from? I didn't get a copy.
Where are we wasting $50,000?
Oh, this was from.
The problem with, the problem with special elections for charters is it requires you need 15% of the population to vote in the majority, and you're not gonna get 15% turnout, so.
Yeah.
15%.
I don't
That's
want
the
to speak for, I don't want to speak for any of us, but I'll speak for myself and assume everybody agrees. I don't think that's an option that any of us would seriously consider. I think we want to figure out how we're putting this to the people, and let's get the decision done. We have now 2 hours and 55 minutes.
No pressure.
If we go over these questions till midnight, you know.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we don't have to go through them
We're
one
doing
by
something wrong.
Can we open discussion?
That's the only one I.
Just to confirm, these,
Oh, you can look. I can share a look.
these were drafted by Jeff Tinley?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first one shall the revised town charter, with the exception of the proposed amendments to section 301 and 202A, and the changes to the titles of first selectman, board of selectmen, and selectmen in the form filed with the town clerk on date and thereafter published as required by law be approved. Yes, Mike?
So I don't know if we have to go through it one by one, because they're all, I think it's related. I'll state where I stand on the questions as a whole. I believe we should put the entire charter, as we just approved it, to the people for a vote, pulling out the issue regarding terms. I believe everything else should go to the people as presented. I believe that the other issues are not as significant in terms of the years of service, which I agree. I think there's an accountability factor, and I completely understand that rationale. So that's where I stand right now. I could be convinced otherwise, but I would be most comfortable, based on the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission as well, putting forth what we just approved, minus 708, but pulling out section 202A as its own question. I might consider us slightly altering. I'd be open to certainly altering the language of how we did that, so there's at least some education potentially that's there, a little bit, maybe a little more clarity, you know, in what that means, because it's not just 2 to 4 years. You know, there, to Justin's point before in our earlier discussion about education, but that's where I stand.
I agree. I think 3 should be broken out as a separate question, and I think the other stuff should just be part of the vote for or against. I don't believe there should be a second place prize for not
Second
winning.
place for what?
I don't think there should be a second place prize as proposed in question 2.
I said this during our discussion when we were multiple times. The nation used to do that. We stopped, like very early on in our history. You know, it never has made sense to me in my time here. It just, you run for your position. So, and then the other issues to me is, you know, Southbury, you know, there was a discussion before about our role, you know, saying no to the bund all those years ago in the Holocaust Museum. Southbury is a town of courage. These don't even require that much courage, the other issues. These are simple, easy changes that I'd be certainly surprised, I'd be extraordinarily disappointed if voters in this town would reject the charter as a whole because of the name of what this body is called, or because they're scared of pronouns. I don't believe that will happen. I believe in Southbury, and I believe the voters are courageous people. And it doesn't even require a lot of courage. It just requires common sense.
As far as the second question goes, that's already been rejected once by the voters. I think it's a little bit disrespectful to just throw it in there again and put it right through without giving the voters a chance to tone in again. They rejected it once. I don't understand why. The only explanation I heard from the Charter Commission was they didn't understand it. I don't know what they wouldn't understand about it, but that was the only explanation I heard. But if they rejected it once, I think they should be given a chance to approve it or reject it again. I think it just makes sense.
I've liked the historical knowledge that Jason's able to afford us by being on the commission years ago and telling us why things were done for what reason. And I think, I'm sorry, but I think that breaking out the questions gives us more information, and it honors the work of that commission. They worked 1.5 years, and for whatever reason, to have something, we will never know which one is the thing that made it not pass. It's just maybe everybody was intimidated by the entirety of accepting all these changes at once, and they just say no. So now, what do we learn from the process that took these people an 18-month period of time? So, I mean, that's my, I believe in the people of Southbury too, for sure, but I also want to learn from the experiences and honor the time of the people who committed to doing this.
So are you saying on...
I don't know, I was looking more globally at the answer.
So are you...
I'm okay. First, personally, would you like me to just make a distinction? I'm okay with the first 4 questions.
Being broken out?
Yes. I think we learned.
I'm a little bit concerned that the gender neutrality question might cause the charter to go down.
And shame on us.
I'm not
then
judging
shame on us.
anybody.
And
I'm just
shame-
saying
then shame on us.
that's
Our
a
job-
risk you're taking by throwing it in there and not
George?
giving the people a chance.
But I'd say then I'd say shame on us, because whatever we agree to, listen, whatever we ultimately agree to as a board, we will all go out and defend, right? I agree. Our job, once we put this forth to the people, no different than how we will advocate for people to vote for us, you know, in our campaign, for each other, we should be advocating for this charter that our neighbors worked on, so hard for such a long time. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we'll see what we decide. But I really will say, and I say this to the people I've been entrusted to represent, if we reject as a town an entirety of a charter because of pronouns, shame on us.
So, I agree. I think on the first 4 questions going out, and maybe it's a compromise between, or a step towards, a step in a direction, rather than a swing in a direction, a step in the direction. I would be okay with sending 1, 2, 3, 4, and the qualifying statement in the beginning of the number 6, that to qualify the statement, and it would make it easier from a document standpoint. I don't know if that's that big a deal, but I think I'd hate to see if the risk of rejection is on number 5, I don't know. I think there's less risk if we ask, if not 5, number 6 may, with that qualifying statement, be palatable to all people. I don't know. Jason?
As I read this, and I was hoping Jeff would be here tonight, but I don't see how you can add language to the charter.
Right. They didn't recommend it.
That's
it's a revision.
That's what I was sort of, when I got this yesterday, and I didn't have a chance to call him today. I wanted to. I'm just not sure we can add. Is that what that's what that question is proposing, is that we add a statement to the charter? I mean, based on what we just discussed.
That's definitely what it says.
No, that language isn't in there. That's my, I have the.
We should have given it to them if you wanted it,
Right.
We should have.
One thing I'll say is I'd like to thank the Charter Commission for listening to all the concerns that were raised on this topic, because they added a provision to the charter that sort of deals with all of the issues that have come up as to costs, changing town records, allowing people to call yourself whatever you want. There's provision in there. I could still be selectman. People could be whatever they want. So I thank them for taking the effort and listening and dealing with that. Personally, to Mike's comments, I feel like when you're making a major substantive change, and especially with the experience last time where people voted against, splitting the elections, like I'd hate for that to be something that, makes the charter go down. I'm in favor of it. I hope we pass that, because I think it's ridiculous that you get a second place prize. But I do think it should be a separate question. Terms, no doubt. So I'm fine with, and changing the name of our, I said this from day one, that I was fine with all the, sending all the changes to the people, but changing the name of our governing body is a significant change that, for people. And I think they should have an opportunity to answer that separately. So I'm good with 1 through 4. I don't think we need 5 or 6. I mean, it's just tight. It's just putting into the charter what's already done in practice. Obviously, we don't refer to women as he or men as she. Like, it's not a, I don't see it as a substantive change, really. It's just putting in the charter what we do in practice already.
Yeah.
So I'm good with 1 through 4.
On the ballot, on the
separate
ballot.
issue.
Separate questions.
I do have a question as to, Lynn, I'm not sure if you know the answer. Do you know what the deadlines are for explanatory text? And is that the same deadline? Today's.
And I need a letter, I need a letter too with the change, with questions.
The questions, but.
I think Doreen was gonna do something up this afternoon, because I took it into her. Let me see if I can find it, if I have it here. Exactly.
We also don't know what the actual charter question is. Like the general charter question.
Well, it's one.
Number one.
It's not, it doesn't, that's number one.
Can I see this
I
one?
know what it was.
Yes, you're right.
Right.
In order to send the questions to the Secretary of State tomorrow, I have to have a letter from the Board of Selectmen saying what the questions are.
Okay.
And to put them on the ballot.
Right. No, I was asking about explanatory text, not questions. Like, the town can come up with, the reason I'm asking is because question 3, someone mentioned it, it's not really, the way it's written now is not, doesn't really explain what the change is to that section, because it's not just changing the terms, it's staggering.
I think you can only add a question, you can't have explanatory text on a ballot.
No, I know on a ballot.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
You'd
What's
have to
that?
put the whole,
Okay. So I'm good with questions 1 through 4, subject to, we need to come up with some language to add to number 3 to make it
A little more informative.
like, reflect what the change actually is.
so we have to have that language. So,
We have 1 hour and 41 minutes, no, 2 hours and 41 minutes.
well, we need to
should
give
take that
Lynn
long.
some breathing room.
She doesn't want to breathe.
I can run.
Where's the section?
Lynn, when does it need to be submitted?
We've got 2 hours and 40 minutes. I'm going to the restroom.
We need to approve it today.
Come up with the questions for the ballot.
So
Does
just-
the board want to take a
But you have to
5-minute
submit that
break?
today by midnight?
No, I have to stamp it in and send it in the morning to the Secretary of State.
In the morning, meeting before noontime?
Yes. Well, before the end of the day.
Before 5? Okay, I'm just looking.
But what you give me, I have to have. I have an instruction on the ballot. I can grab it. For clarity.
You want to take a 5-minute break?
Sure.
We'll take a 5-minute recess.
We lost one of our
Lynn,
people.
let's take a 5-minute recess.
Lynn,
All
we're
in
taking
favor?
a 5-minute
Yeah.
recess.
Get the message? All in favor?
Yes,
Aye.